Man's development and total disregard for the ocean.
Actual litter in the water, on the beach too.
Dumping of raw sewage into the ocean.
When it becomes dangerous to your health to go out in the water.
Like in Australia, we've got a giant problem now with sewage outfalls. We pump the majority of our sewage out into the water.
The biggest threat to surfing is simply competition for the resource.
Yeah, the interest of the fishermen, the interest of the boat owners, the developers.
We accept that and equate progress with growth.
Big business doesn't seem to have a conscience. They don't realize that every time they discharge effluent, it's going to end up in the ocean.
It's not only the ocean, it's the atmosphere. Basically, we're stuffing it all up.
Here is a weather bulletin. High surf advisory number 11. A high surf advisory remains in effect for the north and west shores of all islands. The high surf has been observed to be as high as 20 feet on the north shore of Oahu late Saturday afternoon and is expected to rise further to very dangerous heights of 30 feet tonight through Sunday.
He naru, wave sliding. The Polynesians were doing it long before they discovered Hawaii. As great navigators of the open oceans, they were attuned to its every harmony and rhythm, and it was central to their lives, legends, and livelihood. The nature-worshipping Hawaiians lived in a virtual paradise of plenty, which gave them lots of free time for fun and games, including surfing. Everyone surfed. The women surfed, the men surfed, the priests surfed, the queen surfed, the king surfed, even the gods surfed. Whole villages would drop whatever they were doing to go surfing. Lives and fortunes were won and lost in surfing contests. There were special rituals for building surfboards and even temples to pray for surf. Their myths and stories are filled with legendary surfers, and the language is full of words to describe the surf. In short, surfing was important. Today, surfing is so big the world over that it's hard to imagine that at one time it was almost extinct. After the arrival of the zealous missionaries in the 1820s, the benevolent paradise of plenty was turned upside down. The Puritan missionaries seeking to save the savages replaced their carefree life with work. Their language, religion, and lifestyle were forever altered, and surfing, along with other favorite pastimes, was nearly destroyed. But surfing eventually prevailed. The Waikiki Beach Boys brought surfing back to the ancient royal surf grounds, following in the steps of some unknown Hawaiians who stashed away their boards and surfed despite the new order. If it wasn't for them, things today might not be the same. Geographically, the Hawaiian Islands occupy a unique place in the world of surfing. Circumstances of their creation could not have been better. These volcanic islands pushed through the ocean's surface millions of years ago, rising steeply from the ocean's floor. Fortunately, they are not in the middle of the Pacific, but well above the equator, just below the Tropic of Cancer. It is these circumstances which have put them at the epicenter of surfing.
What makes waves in Hawaii so much bigger than any place else in the world as far as being rideable? The answer to that question is really the location of the Hawaiian Islands with respect to the North Pacific and Siberia. What happens is you've got a very warm current off Japan called the Kurashio. It flows north, and you get winds coming off of Kamchatka or Asia. The cold winds collide with the warm water, and it's in this place where you get these huge storms starting to form. Probably bigger storms there than anywhere else in the world. As they move across the Pacific toward the east, they move southeast toward Hawaii. And after maybe 2 days or 3 days of generation, you get winds 50, 60 knots. Like today, we've got swells coming in which are about 15 to 20 feet that were generated on Thursday afternoon. This is Saturday afternoon, so that was 3 days ago. We've got this huge surf coming in, produced by 60-knot winds, 2,000 miles away, 3 days back in time. We're just far enough south so that we're usually on the other side of the front. So we're as close as we can be to the storm without actually being in the storm. So when the waves come here, they haven't decayed. We have a very short shelf here. So this means that the bottom of the ocean is very steep. And as the waves come in, they concentrate on this very short continental shelf. What the shelf, whether it's an island shelf or a continental shelf, does is to focus the swell. Here the energy is abruptly transformed from deep water to shallow water. This just jams the energy into a small place. All that energy is going to deflect upward. It's got to go somewhere, and so you get a doubling, well, maybe even more than doubling. For example, at Waimea, the swells will go from 10 feet out at sea to 20 feet when they break. So that basically is why our surf's so big.
It was the big surf that brought Rick and others to explore the North Shore in the 50s and 60s. Their adventure was one of rediscovery, for in ancient times, much of the North Shore belonged to kahunas, the priests and professionals of the society. Because of its sacred importance, much of the land was protected by strict kapus, but to live in a kahuna's district was often a bonus to common Hawaiians, for it meant living in the most fertile and abundant part of the island. These sacred lands contained many surfing grounds still used today, like Moku'auia, or Goat Island, Kahana Bay, Pua'ena Point, and Waimea Bay. That ancient domain is still sacred in a sense, for it encompasses the North Shore, truly the epicenter of 20th century surfing. Fred Van Dyke was among the pioneers who rediscovered the surf of the North Shore. With George Downing, Peter Cole, Grigg, Knoll, and others, his experience embodies the now elusive essence of the sport.
When we first came out here in the early 50s, it was a joke. There was a 2-lane highway. There was a policeman who hated Hollies, even though he's a Holly himself, and he'd give us a ticket for going 36 miles an hour in a 35. And it was so uncrowded that you could have a picnic on the middle of Kamehameha Highway any day of the week without any problem. It was really remote out here in those days, and it was not the in thing at all. There were very few homes on Kainui Road, which is probably the mecca of surfing all over the whole world. When we first went out, Peter Cole, Ricky Grigg, Buzzy Trent, George Downing, a few others, when we went out in the waves, we really didn't know how we were going to get back to the beach. Now, that's discounting George Downing, because he taught us everything we knew. But when we first came over here, the rip at sunset was just, to us, it was like the Colorado River. And we did not know that staying in the suit made a difference. So there was a psychological factor that if you lost your board, you might be doomed. The only places we surfed when we first came here, Sunset Beach was a focal, Haleiwa was one, and those were the two places. Actually, that was it. And if it got too big, we went to Makaha to surf. Laniakea, I have to say, was surfed in 55, but it was only because we happened to drive by and there was a 20-foot swell, and it happened to be a north swell, and we didn't know the difference at the time, but it looked good, and we went out, and that's how we surfed Laniakea for the first time. I think the major thing about riding when I rode, when it wasn't crowded, was the camaraderie. Sometimes you have to search for someone to surf with, and when there was just a few of us surfing, and we had to depend on each other because our survival was dependent upon cooperating and helping each other.
Today, there are leashes and lifeguards, and it's been a long time since there's been a picnic on Cam Highway. In the 60s, the hordes were young Californians and Australians, but nowadays the faces in the throngs are different. They come from all over the world, but only a handful of them have the skill and determination to commit themselves to life on the North Shore. Young local Alex Cox is one of those making the grade.
It's pretty hard when you first get here. I don't know, you're just a typical Haole off the boat. And I met a friend, and he showed me the ropes. He took me to all the spots and took me out to all the breaks and introduced me to all the people that I needed to know, all the locals, all the big guys, the guys that take care of you. The first 6 months I was here, I didn't really know much about the power and size, and I got a lot of lessons. I got hurt a lot. I didn't go out on the right size boards, and eventually I learned to ride bigger boards and bigger surf, because you can get into the wave so much easier. You have to have a quiver of boards. You have to have all kinds of boards so you can adjust board sizes to each size of waves. I'll definitely look at certain people for advice. The people that know the most at it, the big breaks, I'll definitely follow. People like Bradshaw and Bobby Owens out at Sunset and at Haleiwa, you know, people like Kerry Terrakina and Marvin Foster. They know what's going on out there. I can learn from them, and I don't have to kill myself while doing it. There's a lot of do's and don'ts. Like at certain spots, you just don't drop in on the guys that are the heavy locals, because you'll really get hurt then. You can't just be dropping in on people that live here. You got to go out there and you got to respect them, because then they'll respect you as well. At some places, respect is earned by going for the heavy closeout, taking off and riding it all the way through, and the locals are respected for that. It's just how it is over here.
For us, here is 7 miles of Oahu's north coast and 7 major breaks from Velziland to Haleiwa. There are dozens of surf spots and centuries of history around every corner, and though the surf pounds beyond this stretch from Kahuku to Kaena Point, the concentration of surfing power in these 7 miles have made them the epicenter.
Reef-wise, it's pretty radical.
When I think of VLAN, the first thing I think of is a killer barrel.
It's a heavy, heavy, shallow reef.
Velzyland is the most aggressive small wave spot.
And you eat it out there, you get almost guaranteed infections and a bunch of other scars.
Piece of cake, foo hot dog wave.
There's a good inside bullet you can get barreled on, a nice outside takeoff. Barrels, locals only. If you only brought your 6.2 or your 6.4 out, you can just spank the wave all the way through.
The first well-known break west of northernmost Kahuku Point is Velzyland, which borrows the name of surf pioneer and master shaper Dale Velzy. Before Dale, Velzyland was known to the Hawaiians as Keaulana. Keaulana stream flows into the bay, creating a classic channeled reef where the coral won't grow. Where it does grow is another story altogether. It's very live, very sharp, and inside it's very close. As in the days when these were kahuna lands, Velzyland today, above all other places on the North Shore, is the reserve of the residents. The locals demand respect, and if you don't give it, you can end up in the coral or spend your time watching from the beach. The embodiment of Hawaiian style and power and all-around waterman Tony Moniz has paid his dues in the lineup and on the reef at VLAN.
VLAN is protected by reef on the inside, so you don't have to deal with any big shore break. And it's your typical North Shore breakaway. It allows a channel for you to paddle out through. So the paddle out is really easy. All you have to do is check it out from the beach, look for the channel. It's not a really wide channel. It's narrow, well-defined. It's easy to pick out from the shoreline. You can see it. The current will take you right up to the lineup. There's a lot of current out there, so you have to keep paddling towards Kavela Bay. Taking off on your ideal wave out at Velzyland. Tip number 1, you gotta toot your horn to deal with the crowd. I think you're paddling in, looking down the line and going, whoo, hey bro, I get him, hey Junior. No, you know, it's a fun hot dog wave. It's really easy to paddle into and just mad dog yourself into the bowl. The wave jacks up, it's bowling. You can just kind of free fall into it and try to stay on your board and pull in. Come out of the barrel. If you make it, do a big roundhouse cut back up into the curl of the wave, and then you set yourself up for another inside section. The reef situation out there is really intense. I've cut myself up a bunch of times. It's really sharp and brittle, really live reef out there. That inside, it just scares me every time I wipe out on the inside. The ultimate conditions would be when it's like, the size would be 4 to 6 foot with the west-northwest swell direction. Again, offshore winds, calling for trade winds. Although Velzyland does handle the wind better than most of the places out on the North Shore. Just being able to get it at the right swell direction and the right tide. At about mid-tide, that's when you'll probably get it at its maximum condition. What happens when the tide gets too high, then it starts to double up more and it gets really fat, but it still barrels because it is a shallow reef on the inside. On your medium tide, it will barrel more from the outside, going across the inside section. So I reckon that's a better time to go out to VLAN. If it gets over 6, 7 foot is maximum. Anything bigger than that, it just washes through. It's just a big mush of white water, and it doesn't happen.
big and exciting.
Because you think you'll be sitting in the right spot, and all of a sudden, a 15-foot set will come in 50 yards where you aren't.
A big giant wall coming at you, scared to death if it's going to hit you or not.
And then you'll move down there, and 50 yards down that side, another one will come in.
Massive intensity.
But once you finally hook up on one, you can there's a lot of speed, and there's a killer inside barrel. There's a lot of power that you can feel.
The ever-challenging big wave spot.
It rivals any wave around the world for power.
Ultimate challenge.
Moving west from Velzeland and around Sunset Point is one of the foci of all surfing, Sunset Beach. It's a place where legends are made. To Hawaiians, it is known as Pamalu, meaning taken by surprise, from a legend about a selfish woman who broke a fishing kapu by taking too much and was surprised when her legs were bitten off by the guardian shark of the reef. In the early days, the Hawaiians would trek here from Kauai in spring and fish all summer. Then, after surfing the first fall swells, they would return to Kauai. Sunset is characterized by its deep channel and deep water peak breaking over a classically formed reef where Paumalu Creek enters between the peak and Kamiland. Moving west from the tip of the point, first there's Backyards, a shallow, sharp reef break, then the point surf of the break called Sunset Point, and finally, the infamous Sunset Peak. Its classic form is a thick, wind-blown pyramid of water that pitches tons of power. If not a test of sheer nerve, it is a supreme challenge of surfing skills, with a river-like rip, shifting, fickle peaks, and more massive crowds. Sunset plays no favorites. Whether a local hero or a haole gremmy, Sunset's appetite is indiscriminate. But the reward is great for the committed like Ken Bradshaw or perennial Sunset flowmaster Bobby Owens. Bobby's intelligent and intensely committed approach to Sunset means experience and style of the highest order.
One thing about Sunset is just paddling out can be a pretty interesting experience in itself. If the swell happens to be coming out of the north, you have a pounding shore break you have to deal with. All the water really pushes in heavy on the shore break, and you can have like a solid 6-foot pounding shore break to deal with. But really, it's not much problem getting through it. You just have to use some good timing and just not jump in the middle of a big set that's coming through. Eventually there's going to be a lull, so as long as you time it right, there's really nothing to it. When you're paddling out, you experience right away the magnitude of the infamous Sunset Rip. There's a lot of water moving around. I tend to just flow with it, and a lot of times you can use this rip to your advantage and actually let it drift you out to the break. I think that seems to be the whole thing in dealing with currents and rips, is just flowing with them, but, making sure you're going in the right direction, obviously. Lining yourself up for a takeoff at sunset is really where the big risk factor comes in. To be effective, you really have to place yourself within the parameters of the impact zone. And that means pretty much relying on your knowledge and experience to avoid getting yourself caught inside. Everybody has coordinates out there, both on the beach and out in the lineup, and I think you have to rely on those coordinates really to make the best decisions. Without having that knowledge and good placement in the break, that sense of knowing where the wave is going to peak, you're already at a disadvantage out there because that's everything to catching waves at sunset. When you look at the anatomy of a sunset beach wave, say like on a 12-foot day, you can kind of break it down into 3 major things going on. Usually you have a real critical drop thanks to that notorious jacking effect, not to mention the strong trade winds holding you high up there. The drop is just a phenomenal part of the wave. Where else do you see people getting stuck up in the lip, just pitched out into oblivion like you do at sunset? I love just paddling straight into a big northwest peak and whipping around underneath the lip. When you make it, there's this incredible sense of accomplishment. A lot of times you just get stuck up there for the longest time and you end up practically floating down on a cloud of air. After dealing with a really late windy takeoff, you sometimes find yourself dealing with a lot of bump on the way down, and you find your knees are acting like shock absorbers for you. You're traveling down the face just going full bore, going over all these bumps, and you're almost letting your other senses just take care of those things. you're rushing down the trough, setting yourself up for a real big bottom turn. Then you come off the top and you're going into the next stage, which has its own kind of variations. And there are several things that the wave can do depending on the swell direction. So basically, it can either flatten out on you and you do a lot of adjustments and setting yourself up for the inside. But the second stage can be a very good part of the wave to do the best turns on. It can be the facier part of the whole ride where you can set yourself up for some good maneuvers, real good in the pocket kind of stuff. And then when you come into the inside, everything just goes all out, full bore, really unpredictable inside section. But it really depends on the swell direction. It changes so much with each swell direction. pretty difficult for me to put my finger on what direction or what type of sunset I prefer the most. I think the most obvious choice really would be the northwest swell. This type of swell, it's not that much different than a west peak. It comes out of the channel. It's basically a deep water peak. It has plenty of pitch and a really nice drop. You get a nice square bottom to turn off of, and you have a pocket that's just really well defined and usually pretty hollow. The wave keeps tapering off towards the inside, so you have plenty of wave to work with. And the whole time, the wave is bending in towards the point, horseshoeing, so you've got a nice, really clean pocket to turn in and out of. I think the west swells enable me to get my late takeoffs down to where they feel second nature to me. A lot of times on a big west swell, you're taking off underneath all this tons of power, and even though there may not be as much wall on the inside, the drop is so intense it more than makes up for it. Early in the season, as the winter starts setting in and things are taking shape, you get a lot of northerly swells. The northerly swells are a lot facier. They start off the point. You get big, long sections, and even though the inside is super intense, you have a real playful outside. I shouldn't really say playful, but you're able to take advantage of all the face and do a lot of turns. And you come into this enormous bottoming out inside section that is completely unpredictable. And you may either get the tube ride of your life, or you may get shut down so horribly that you never want to surf sunset again.
It's the most consistent hot dog wave on the North Shore. You can always have a good time out there on the lefts or the rights.
Rocky Point is probably the most overrated left.
It's a piece of pie. Just go out and have a good time.
It gets fun, but it never really gets that good.
It's getting next to impossible to find a hole in the crowds there now to get your fun time in.
The rights are all right.
Rocky Point, give it a miss.
The lefts are just, you know, they're usually packed and really average.
Fun.
Moving west, away from the Sunset Peak, across the deep water of the channel, and on the other side of Pomaloo Creek are the steep, fun lefts and rights of the relatively relaxed peak at Kamiland. Continuing west from there is a stretch of coral and rock reefs with a few unremarkable breaks. A short stroll from there is the ancient coral of Rocky Point. The coral here has long since turned to limestone, and the rocky shore and reef it forms gives Rocky Point its name. This beach break-like spot makes it a favorite to hordes of traveling surfers, and because it breaks so close to shore, it is equally favored by photographers. When not ripping it up on the world tour, Marty Thomas can step right out his back door and catch Rocky Point in all conditions.
To me, Rocky Point is one of the most fun spots that I surf on the North Shore. It's not a big wave spot. It handles up to about 8 feet. But the good thing about it is it handles any direction of swell that we get on the North Shore. My favorite swell for Rocky Point is about 4 to 6 foot with a combination of a northwest swell, where the lefts are peeling down the point really nicely, and there's also really good rights. You can surf the rights for a while, get some nice tubes, some nice maneuverable waves, and you can also be surfing the lefts. So it's good for the crowd controls to have both lefts and rights working off the point. And it's a lot similar to a beach break where there's different peaks up and down the point. It's not just one main peak. The Rockies is one of the most crowded places on the North Shore when it's, you know, 4 feet, because it's an easy way to surf for most international travelers. We're off the wall in in backdoor at that size is just one peak. And to go out there and try and compete with the local Hawaiians and the pros, it's pretty difficult. But Rocky Point's easier to surf, so most people come and surf Rocky. There's two main ways to enter the surf break at Rockies. It's pretty simple to paddle out around the left on the shoulder. There's a current running out, and it's a short paddle, and it's pretty basic. For those of the people that live down by the rights and park the car at the rights, they also enter the break on the reef and actually walk out on the reef. It requires actually walking on the reef for about 50 yards and waiting in between sets, and then scraping, trying to get out there as quick as you can, because if you do get washed up on the rights, it's pretty hazardous because it's real shallow, especially at low tide. When the sets come in, they bump up, and you're able to see what direction they're going and sort of set up for the set to determine whether you want to go left or right. The takeoff is not real hairy, such as like Pipeline, how it is real shallow and hollow. It's a pretty, minor takeoff. For me, I prefer to take off deep at Rockies and get good speed going down the line. That way it offers you the best opportunity for maneuvers. It's a real fast wave if you use the wave proper. The wave stands up and it's got a good steep part to the wave, so I try and use the pocket and the bottom to generate my speed. And it's a fairly shallow wave, so if you do your bottom turn just in the right time when the water is rushing up, you can get a lot of thrust and a lot of speed off the bottom, and therefore maintain your speed for the entire wave. If you're surfing the left, you'll take off on the outside and you'll get your wave and do some good maneuvers. It's the bigger part of the wave. And once you come to the inside, there's a built-up sandbar that's just really sucking out, and it starts to get really fast, similar to a beach break. And that part of the wave allows you to do a lot of radical maneuvers, and when the sandbar is built up nice, it's probably the funnest part of the wave. A lot of times, guys just surf on the shoulder of Rocky Left. The right goes into the shallow reef on towards gas chambers. So you're limited to your opportunities on the inside. You can't do very many closeout re-entries or really charge it at the end of the wave because of the reef and depth rock. The depth rock sticks up at the end of the right out of nowhere. And at low tide, it sticks about 3 feet out of the water. So it's definitely an obstacle and something that you try and look out for. For me to describe my dream wave, so to speak, at Rocky Point, I'd have to describe two, because it'd have to be a right and a left. And for me, I like to take off deep behind the peak, take off and just pull into the tube at an angle, get a nice tube at the takeoff, come out, and you still got a long 100 yards of wall going down the beach. That's probably my ideal right at Rocky Point. As far as the left goes, I like to come off the bottom and just do a lot of top turn at Rocky Left on the outside. And then the wave works all the way into to where the sandbar is, and there you can either get a backhand tube or a layback tube, or throw some really nice spectacular lip maneuvers, like floaters and lip launches, like they call them. But so, I got two ideal waves at Rocky Point.
It's not always ideal waves, but ideal photo conditions that make Rocky Point one of the main spots on the North Shore for the pros to push the limits for the surfing media. From ancient times into the 20th century, surfboards remained essentially unchanged. There were the olo, the kiko'o, alaya, and paipo, different boards for different waves and surfing styles. Shaping then was a blend of spirit and craft. A carefully picked koa or wili-wili tree provided the blank and was cut down with an offering in a special ritual. The blank, chopped from the tree with the stone adze, was carried off to the halau to be carved down with rough coral and stone into its finished shape. Today, the shaping room replaces the halau, and tools and materials are radically different. But as top North Shore shaper Pat Rawson shows, the good shaper today is no less an artist, combining his wave knowledge, craftsmanship, and the needs of each surfer to create that magic board.
I started shaping more or less on a full-time basis in 1977 for George Downing and for Locomotion, and I've just been in the room since then. There was two people I really looked at that time. One was Dick Brewer and the other was Ben Ipa, and they were both completely different schools of shaping, but Ben basically had worked with all the people that were so formative in hot dogging, like Larry Bertelman and Dane, and all those guys came from Ben. And of course, Brewer basically had a lot of the guys like Al Chapman, Sam Hawk, Hackman, all those guys. So Brewer to big waves was kind of like what I saw as Ben Ipa was to the small waves here. And I guess there's probably a mixture of both those guys in my boards. One thing I've always tried to do is to be versatile. That was the most important thing to me, to be able to make a paddle board or a tanker or a 12-foot Waimea board or a 510 for Japan. But I think it's important, just like in surfing, to keep challenging your abilities to be a total craftsman. If you think of a wave, it's basically just a spiral. And in Hawaii, the spirals are very hollow, it's round. And you just want to match your rockers in accordance to that. Well, basically what happens is you're just taking a normal California or Australia small board and adding tail on, whether it be onto the rocker. You just continue that line straight out, or even on the template as well. So you're basically just extending the ends of the board, stretching it out, because you're covering a lot more area of wave. Like a lot of the turns at sunset are longer than most waves are long in California. You know, you might do a 100-yard turn out there if it's a big enough wave. So you definitely need a board that's stretched out. That's basically the main difference between the Hawaii board and the California boards.
Ancient boards still have their parallels in modern surfing, from big wave guns, which are like the old Olo, to body boards, which are like the Paipo. But the demands of performance surfing maintain an era of endless refinements. As a consummate competitor, ASP world champion Barton Lynch always maintains a sizable Hawaiian quiver.
Well, this winter I got a wide variety of boards from 4 or 5 different shapers and ended up with about 20 boards in total. But these are the pick of my boards. These are the boards I've been riding the most this winter, everything from a 6'6", shaped by Greg Webber from Australia, up to a 9-footer shaped by Chris Lundy. This is a 7'3" that was shaped by Rusty Priesendorfer from California. This board was made specifically with pipeline in mind. It has a very tight, very narrow tail. As the boards start to get bigger, the tails become tighter and the boards become narrower, which makes them easier to sort of manage in the bigger surf. By having that narrow tail, it enables you to have a bit more curve throughout the board, which makes it easier to take the drops at pipeline because they're so steep and so critical. Has a little more rocker through it than what you'd have in a board for, say, sunset, because the waves are so tight. And you need to be able to drop down the face and make your turn very early in the wave, which is why you have the more curve and the more rocker. The tight tail is to make it more secure, and so that you don't spin out and kill yourself at pipeline. This is shaped by Greg Webber. It's a 7'10". Again, a very tight pintail on this board. The problem I think you run into with boards made by Australian and Californian shapers is that they tend to be a little too sensitive for bigger surf in Hawaii. The Hawaiian shapers are here all year round and they're in tune with it, and they shape boards that are sort of perfectly suited to these waves. This board goes great, but it is a little too sensitive at times, particularly on the windy days at sunset when you're taking the drops and you've got a lot of wind and a lot of chop to face. But it's a good board. It goes really well in a clean wave. In a windy wave, you need something that's a little heavier and sits down. Now, move on to the mother. This is 9 foot. It's shaped specifically with Waimea in mind. I've ridden it only on a few occasions. It very rarely gets big enough for it, but I've surfed it 4 or 5 occasions in the Billabong Pro last year, and the board goes fantastic. It's super secure, very solid. You would think for a 9-foot board would be very stiff, but it's got these cutaway fins here that Chris Lundy was working with last winter. With the cutaway here, you don't have as much base to the fin, which makes it a lot freer and looser. So this, for a 9-foot board, you can actually maneuver it quite well. It comes off the bottom and off the top very well. And this is the heavy artillery.
Continuing west from Rocky Point is a stretch of shore from the hollow left of gas chambers down to Ehukai Beach Park. Known as Pupukea, or sometimes sandbars, the breaks here vary greatly depending on the seasonal shifting of sand, but is generally fun, peaky beach break which attracts grims, families, tourists, and weekend crowds. To Hawaiians, it is known as Pupukea, which means white shell, and in ancient times it belonged to the kahunas of Kuali'i. A solitary outcrop juts from a cliff over Pupukea. It is sometimes referred to as the Washington Stone, but Hawaiians know it as Kahikilani, a young prince from Kauai who came to Oahu on a safari looking for new challenges. He didn't find Waikiki to his liking, but found just what he wanted on the North Shore. He conquered all the great surfs of Oahu and won the heart of a beautiful enchanted princess, too. But in the end, she turned him into stone for being unfaithful, and here he remains for eternity, unable to get to the surf. Hers was the cruelest punishment of all, for on the stretch of beach which he is condemned to survey is a shallow reef of stone and lava which forms the most renowned and consistent tube-making machine on the planet.
Pipe's insane. Full rush when you're out of pipe. It gets a
giant sucking tube.
Pipe can kill you.
Explosive, massive, you need that killer instinct.
It gets so heavy out there, some ways that are so compressed and so round and so thick and gnarly.
Pipeline's a spectacular event when it happens.
It gets...
Only for the pipe masters.
You know, it's heavy out there.
Ehukai, sea spray. It's little wonder it bears this name. For a few yards west of this beach park, a shallow reef rises steeply close to shore, creating a freakish wave of unparalleled intensity. Pipeline. The steep reef here quickly pulls the swells out of deeper water, focusing them into thick, cavernous waves which break in water less than half their height. And when conditions are right, its consistency is relentless.
First of all, it's not your typical reef break where most surf spots in Hawaii has a channel. You don't have that out at Pipe. You paddle out from the beach. There's a combination of things you got to deal with. You want to make sure there's a lull before you jump out. Generally, you walk down the beach and sort of line up with the guys who are surfing out there, and you let the current pull you down towards Ehukai, and hopefully you'll time it right so you can get past that shore break. Although most of the wave is heavy, the initial takeoff plays for the rest of the wave. Trying to get into the wave is really important because Pipe is a really steep wave no matter what size it is. I think that's the most critical part of the wave. That's the heaviest section. I want to make sure that I can get into it early enough so I'll be able to make the takeoff. But a lot of times you don't have time to think, so accidents occur. You end up going over the falls, or you end up making it to the bottom and having the whole wave come over you before you can even make your turn. You make mistakes and you pay your dues. But if you can make the takeoff, basically you have enough time to negotiate the rest of the wave. There's a couple of different things you can choose to do. I feel either hanging onto your rail and kind of sliding and pulling up into the barrel, or just coming off the bottom and going out further and making a longer bottom turn, coming around the tube and setting yourself up as you're going down the line. There's a few guys who like to pull in from the top, you know, for the guys who always surf pipe. It's safer to make your bottom turn, make the bottom first, get down, and then make your turn. You can set yourself up, you have enough time to get away from the critical part, which is making a takeoff. And you kind of have those two options out at pipe. The ultimate thing about the wave is getting barreled. It's known for its tube riding, and secondly, I just like this takeoff. It's so steep, it's just a straight up and down takeoff. I can really get a rush and having a heavy takeoff and just riding the wave without getting barreled. It's also a good rush of adrenaline. The ultimate pipe, when it comes and goes, you need the west swell. During the spring, when the beach is all cleaned up, the sand on the shoreline needs to be washed away, and that would make it ideal for the setup out there. The bigger it gets, the further out it breaks. You can go out to second reef, and it's an easier wave actually when it's out at second reef. But the hard part is getting out past the shore break. That's the tricky part. Once you're out in the lineup, it's an easier takeoff. You can get into the wave and just hot dog it. You have time to set yourself up for the inside. And as you're coming into the inside shelf, then you're dealing with a lot of reef. And it's more intense. Whenever pipe is big, there's always a little bit of fear inside of you. I think without that, I wouldn't be surfing. You know, I wouldn't have that challenge to go off. But it seems like as time goes on, you just find yourself respecting the break more. I can look back when I was 18 years old, 19 years old, just beginning to surf out at pipes. I was more of a madman or gun-ho, you know, just going out and just going for it, the full kamikaze.
In anybody's wildest imagination, it would be enough that there is one pipeline. But the North Shore is a place of superlatives. Thus, Pipeline shares its peak with its right-handed twin, Backdoor. When it's on, it can match Pipeline wave for wave, simultaneously, and with the same relentless consistency.
Off the wall is one of the most temperamental waves around here, but also one of the most rewarding when you catch it.
Off the wall is really, really good, deep barrels. You can get 10-second, 5-second barrel rides and then come out and you can hit it real hard.
Heavy, man, heavy.
It's a real good surfable wave and it's a good barrel wave, so it has a little bit of both.
A short paddle from Backdoor across a narrow gap in the reef is off the wall. It's a fickle but rewarding right peeler, and occasionally it shows a good left. Breaking close to shore with often ideal light, it is another top photo spot despite its inconsistency, and during the height of the competitive season, the lineup of photographers can bring out a surfing frenzy.
When you want to get your mind off of big wave surfing, there's really no better place to turn to than off the wall for full bore, small wave surfing. getting out is just waiting for a lull in the sets and then jamming out there. Once you're in the lineup, everything is pretty stationary, really. There's a lineup that everybody uses, and that's just the wall back on the beach. It's really easy to line yourself up with the peak. The bottom and off the wall is mainly lava rock, with parts of it being covered with sand. So it's a combination of the two. It's sharp enough to give you a good cut, but not nearly as sharp as a break like Velzyland, where there's actual coral growing. On the takeoff, you can come in contact with the bottom. You're closer to a shallower part of the reef. The further down the line you go, usually the safer it gets because you're back on the sandy patch. I think the most frightening thing at off the wall is just getting caught inside, right in the impact zone on a beset. You know, all of a sudden you're there in the wrong place. There's no place to go. It's really too shallow to dive to the bottom. So you get the full concussion treatment, and it's not pretty. Off the wall is really sensitive to swell direction. Sometimes you think it's a blend of a west and a northwest together, and you'll get those conditions and it still will be closing out. Other times the tide will change just a few feet, and the next thing you know, it's firing. And it can be real temperamental all day long. It can be 1/2 an hour on, 1/2 an hour off. And you really need to be checking it a lot to really have any success at getting it pretty good. Off the wall will have a tendency to be better later in the winter because of the west swells draining all the sand out. What it'll do is let the water drain out where it's supposed to, and that's down the beach. And the more exposed the lava rock is underneath the sand, the less backwash there will be in the break. Periodically, you'll get a lot of sand forming down on the end part of the wave at off the wall. And the wave will shut down really hard down there. Sometimes it's totally makeable. You can scream right through there. Other times, it'll shut down on you right in the middle of a tube ride and you'll just bounce right off the sand. I think the ideal thing about surfing off the wall is because the wave itself is so fast, it makes you think quick. You have to surf it real spontaneously. Before you know it, the whole thing's over with in a split second, it seems like. When you set up for a wave at off the wall, everything just happens freeze frame fast. Everything is late and critical, and before you know it, everything's over with. It's a short but super intense wave. Usually everything just goes square on you the moment you take off, and you kind of fall into a pit, and sometimes you'll get a good square bottom turn. Other times it will just be so late that you're tubed on takeoff and you're just backdooring it from the very first moment you take off. The emphasis at off the wall, without a doubt, is tube riding. The waves that don't really completely barrel out are some of the better rides you get at off the wall because they give you the opportunity to do some really nice turns. Usually the wave itself is still pretty hollow, so the type of performance moves you do, usually there's a lot of release in all those moves where you don't get at other spots where the waves are facier. That's one of the things that makes off the wall really a rush, is that the whole time the wave is putting out a lot of power and it's usually pretty hollow. And all the moves that you do are based around that wave being really pretty hollow.
Though the North Shore is the epicenter of modern surfing, the real heart of Hawaiian power radiates from west of the Waianae Range. The true Hawaii still lives here in both the land and the people of this tightly knit community. And though the breaks here are fiercely local, if one comes with the right attitude, the aloha can be just as strong. Buffalo Keaulana is the undisputed patriarch of Makaha, having guided generations of surfers into the waves of the sea. His son Brian is a modern, thoroughly Hawaiian waterman.
I was born and raised right here on Makaha Beach. My dad used to be the park keeper of Makaha Beach here in 1960. I was born in 61. We used to have this beach house that was right here. The first time he took me out surfing was when I was about 3 months old. Actually, this is my playground, my backyard. I know every single rock and everything that's out there in the ocean and around the beach. Everybody, my whole family was all into surfing, from my mom to my sister to my brother, everybody, because we live here. We're here to enjoy our life, enjoy what we do, enjoying surfing and stuff. When there's no surf, we sail cats and we go diving, when it's flat, we go fishing. The thing about Makaha is it's a close, bonded family together. Here it's a local kind of atmosphere, but more like a family. Everybody down here respects one another. It's like you respect your older brothers, you respect your elderlies, you respect everybody who's around. What the Hawaiians used to say before, always respect the ocean. It's the same thing that applies now with most of the families and all the people that come here and surf. When I was 8, 10 years old, I started paddling. My dad got me a small 3-man canoe to paddle around with. So I started to paddle and figure, well, maybe I can surf waves like the old Hawaiians used to do before. So I practiced when I was about 13 years old. And then as I got better, I started to just ease into Makaha till today, where now we're catching 10 to 15-foot waves. Everybody works as one in a team. What you're trying to do is position yourself on the wave for the right position. It's the same thing as surfing. As you're on the wave, you try to communicate with your team members to keep the boat totally balanced so you can maneuver the boat around and do certain tricks, like we surf on the ama. We surf on that. We do headstands, handstands, spinners. We do all kind of crazy things. It's kind of fun, and challenging. I kind of like that challenge, whether it be big waves or small waves. The more we can learn, the better for us down here. The most precious thing that we have down here is knowledge. So what we like to do is we like to pass on our knowledge. That's how the Hawaiian culture actually was carried on from before. Nothing was written. The hula was passed on from person to person to person. Same thing here. My father's family passed on ocean knowledge to him, and he learned on his own. He passed it on to me. When I have my kids, I'll pass it on to him, and my friends, and his friends. And we just actually try to share everything among each other so nothing dies out, because when you hold everything back, then when you pass on, everything's lost.
Terrifying.
I love Waimea.
It's a heavy drop.
Waimea doesn't break enough.
Waimea is the most intimidating beast of a wave on the North Shore.
You only surf there once a year if you're lucky, maybe 3 times. which is kind of a bummer.
The undescribable ultimate essence.
When it breaks, it's probably one of the highest highs you can get off surfing any surf spot.
Experience, only the men.
West of Pupukea is the confluence of two mokus, or large land divisions that have lasted for more than 20 generations. The land here belonged to the kahunas of Pa'au, a great seafaring leader. Named for the muddy red water which flows from the river, the sacred lands of Waimea are ringed by heiaus or temples and fishing shrines. The heiaus here were places for birth, regeneration, and knowledge. The rituals have long since passed, but occasionally kapu sticks and offerings are still found at the altar, and if one listens carefully, the sounds of the past return. But praying wasn't all they did here, for the ancients loved to ride the huge surf right up into the Waimea River, and it's still recalled in a song, Ku'uipo ikahe'e pueone. My sweetheart surfs over the sandbar. Waimea was also called Mauna Wai, which means water mountain. It's always been an important source of fresh water, but these days, Water Mountain has a different meaning. From 4 to 12 feet, a bumping, mushing wave known as pinballs breaks inside along the point. Crowded with water photographers, it is often inflated for media exposure. But when the swells pass 15 feet, a magical transformation takes place, making this the most renowned big wave in the world. Jumping from a depth of 80 to 20 feet, the bottom literally lifts a 3-story cliff of water into the air, leaving the rider perched on the ledge. Waimea has its devoted regulars, among them Derek Durner, Ken Bradshaw, Roger Erickson, and, despite his young years, Brock Little, who is busy carving his name in the pantheon of big wave riders.
Getting out of Waimea is a lot easier than people think it would be. There's a lot of kooks getting out there anyway, and if it was that hard, they wouldn't be able to get out there. But on the left-hand side of the bay, there's just gnarly 10-foot, 8 to 10-foot double-up, suck-up waves that can kill anyone. And then where we paddle out, there's a little bit of white water and there's a big channel, and you just got to be able to time the sets. So right when you jump out, you just got to watch out that the sets aren't coming in. Otherwise, you got to deal with a 4-foot double up on a sandbar, which isn't very fun. But once you're past that little sandbar line, then you're safe and you can paddle out. And there's a huge channel unless it's like 30 foot, and you just stay in that channel, and all of a sudden you're out there with about, if it's 20 foot, with a whole bunch of 30 other kooks who just paddle out there, which is a bummer because the crowd at Waimea is getting out of hand. Waimea is just like anywhere else, condition-wise. It's best when there's a real light offshore wind, so it doesn't really hold you up too long, but we'd like to have a little bit of wind in there. I think the only factors is having at least 20 to 25 foot swell and having a light offshore wind, from almost any direction it takes. Actually, on some directions, it probably closes out faster than on others, but on the average, when it's 25 foot, it starts closing out. There's a pretty definite peak, but when the big sets come in, they tend to shift more towards the middle of the bay. So the peak is pretty consistent, and the big ones usually swing a little bit wide. But usually it's really easy. It's too easy. That's why there's a lot of people that go out because it's so basic. There's so many guys now that want to ride Waimea because it's kind of got popular. So it's kind of a bummer. The level of performance dwindles heavily because I can't go out and really ride like an 8.2 or a small board like I want to, and I'm churn and everything because I'm worried about getting dropped in on and this and that, and there's always people around. The ideal wave is the bigger the better. Hopefully you're far enough out and ready for it, and it usually feathers outside the reef, and hopefully what happens is when it's way out there, there's a little chop that you can get into, and if you find that chop, then you're breezing. So you paddle really hard because there's so much water moving up the face, it's almost impossible to get down. So you got to paddle your hardest, find that chop, stand up, and then it hits the reef and it jacks up almost straight up. And from there, the drop is just straight down, and by far the most critical thing is just taking the drop. There's so much water moving in, and the wave is so strong that if you hit the wave will knock the air out of you, and then you're underwater with no air, and it's just like a real tough experience. And that's probably the worst thing that can happen when they beat it in the drop. That's when you get hurt, and then you stand there forever. You just gotta kind of hope that your board holds and pray that the lip doesn't land on your head. And then from there, if it's an insane killer one, then the wave will close out. And then you're kind of screwed, but it's cool because you just caught a huge, huge, huge wave, and that's where it's at. That's what it's about. The best thing about Waimea is trying to ride the biggest wave that comes in. That's what it's all about. It's a lot of fun taking the drop and everything else, and the adrenaline gets going, and it's just, that's all that counts. It's the best thing about Waimea. It's taking a drop and riding some waves that you didn't think could be ridden or that you could ride, and especially, they can kill you. Crewman says that in order to ride the biggest waves, you gotta be willing to pay the ultimate price. I'm not sure if I agree with that, because, that's pretty heavy. Along that line, it's like you're going out and putting your life on the line. Surviving it is like one of the highest of all highs. The attitude I like to have is you're always going to come up no matter what. So, one day if you don't come up, then you have the attitude that you were going to come up, so it works out. I always have good experiences on Waimea, because if I don't get a good wave, then one of my friends do. And watching them get good waves is just a really exciting, it's nothing compared to me getting good ones, but it's just a really, really good, exciting experience. And I usually always get some good ones. So, whenever it's over 20 foot, I'd say that's when I have an exciting time. Getting in's pretty basic. All you got to do is ride your wave all the way in, and you get to that sandbar and it's like a 4-foot double up. And riding a 9-0 board, you can't really surf it in, so you gotta kind of wash in. If you're lucky, you do it coolly, like just kind of grab your board and get on the back of the wave and wash right in. But if you're unlucky, you end up just getting smashed and taking off your leash and having your board wash up first. And coming in, usually you just come in anyway with all kinds of sand on you, but you're so high from surfing Waimea that it doesn't matter. You just getting in's almost, unless you lose your board and you've got to swim through the shore, but getting in's, no matter how you get in, you're always happy, even if you get nailed, because it's such a high surfing Waimea.
West of Waimea Bay, a coastline punctuated by lava points, reefs, and long reaches of sand beach stretches to Pu'aina Point and the Haleiwa Harbor Channel. Though not as famous as the shore from Velzyland to Off the Wall, the breaks here offer a wide variety of waves. But the best thing about it is that it offers opportunity. Even now into the 90s, it is possible to find your own wave, or a relatively mellow crowd at places like Uppers, Alligator Rock, Tiddley's, and Leftovers, to name just a few. Two more frequented breaks are Chun's and Jocko's, which share opposite sides of a channel. Jocko's is a very respectable left, which can throw a long, thick barrel on the right swell. Right across the channel is Chun's, which is noted as a beginner's break for the North Shore. Around the point to the west of Jocko's is Laniakea, fun at any size. But when there's a big, straight north swell, it becomes a pure, high-performance beast, boasting long, racy walls and top-to-bottom freight-training barrels.
Haleiwa to me is the ultimate big wave performance spot.
Haleiwa is one of the best waves to surf. You can just, you can spank it almost anywhere you want to.
A nice, thick, long right.
There's two, major things wrong with it, and that's the rip and the inside toilet bowl.
I don't know about you, but it scares me more than Sunset.
If those things weren't there, the wave would be one of the best waves in the world.
For North Shore, sheer fun.
On the east end of Wailua Bay is Haleiwa Ali'i Beach. Pele, the goddess of fire and volcanoes, once lived here, and the area abounds with legends about her stay. Named for one of her followers, Pua'ina Point is across the harbor channel. It was a sacred healing site as well as a favorite surfing spot. Haleiwa means home of the frigate bird, a large seafaring bird long praised by Polynesians for its beauty and graceful flight, and is often recognized as an aumakua or a personal guardian spirit. Odo Vanderleden has been guarding and surfing here for more than a decade and has an intimate knowledge of Haleiwa.
I've worked in almost all conditions you can think of here. In summertime, it's totally flat as a mill pond, and I've seen it go all the way up in winter to 35 and occasionally 45 feet. This is Haleiwa Ali'i Beach. It often gets confused with Haleiwa Beach Park just across the way here. Over to our right-hand side there, we have Pua'ina Point and the famous giant avalanche over here on the left. And straight in front, one of the greatest surf spots on the North Shore. First of all, I'd say it's a very comfortable beach because it's so cut and dried, easy to go out. The current takes you out. It's just a matter of 30 to 60 seconds and you're right in the lineup already with almost hardly a stroke. And you can play it safe with just a little bit of sense, up to 8 feet. So that's why up to from 4 to 6 to 8 feet, you'll see a lot of guys riding the tankers, and you see a lot of girls surfing. It's another ballpark altogether when it's over 10, 12 feet. The Haleiwa Reef, a V-shaped reef, which just gives you very good conditions for both a left and a right. It's a consistent, gentle slope all the way out. There's some little ravines in, but no nasty caves or anything that's very dangerous. The most tricky part of it is towards the end of the right breaking waves. There's a very shallow part we call the toilet bowl. The sloping where the left-hand breaking wave breaks is very gentle. There's nothing critical about the left breaking wave at all. It just breaks slowly into deep water. Because we have this long, flat, gently sloping reef at Haleiwa, when the surf is big, it's pretty unrelenting if you get caught inside. It tends to hold you under for a very long time. Instead of having like a pipeline type impact, Haleiwa just rolls you on and on. Wind-wise, the trade winds are fine, the east-northeast winds, but the best swell direction, you're talking about just a nice mix of north and west with just predominantly west in it. And if it gets too west, then you'll find that the toilet bowl part starts closing out on you and rights don't stay open that well. In Haleiwa Beach, we have this very shallow, flat reef that we call the toilet bowl, and the place to go out is right there. What you do is you jump in there, and the water that flows over the shallow reef will pull you into the Haleiwa Trench, and then you go along the edge of the trench, and the extra water that flows right over the Haleiwa Reef will suck you back in right into the lineup. Because of all the water overflowing the Haleiwa Reef, you get this tremendous drift, and you'll see surfers out there just paddling like trout continuously. It's non-stop to just stay in position. Just to give you an idea of the effect of large surf here at the beach, today we're looking at something really flat, but see the harbor buoy out there? It's 3/4 of a mile out from us, and I've seen the surf here when it gets 30 feet, 35, and I've seen it go up to 45. It'll break about 1/4 of a mile out past the buoy, and the buoy will just be engulfed with white water from a broken wave, and it'll come further in and reform on the inside. Of course, on days like that, we have to totally close the beach to any sort of water activity at all, and the same way the Haleiwa Harbor is closed too, because those sets will just close out the harbor channel. And just to illustrate a point, I'll show you a few photographs of Mark Martinson trying to come in one day when the sets were breaking at 35 feet. And you'll see what I mean. The boat almost gets lost on an extra big closeout set. The outside channel marker there is a really good indicator on big swells. We watch that, and when that thing disappears completely behind the incoming swell, you know you've got at least about a 8-foot wave coming in.
Oahu's North Shore. It's only 7 miles from Velzeland to Haleiwa. It's just a short drive down Cam Highway. But it's a drive packed with more power, more size, more consistency, and more variety than anywhere on the planet. It may only be a short trip, but it's a trip that spans the centuries of surfing's rich heritage, a legacy which is a privilege for every surfer to share.